Hello there, Johnny from Eurogamer here, and I just want to talk to you a bit about For Honor. Ubisoft's sword-swinging, axe-hefting, head-chopping action game is very nearly upon us, with an open beta running across PC, PS4 and Xbox One. Now, there's quite a bit to get to grips with in For Honor, and with the beta only running for a short time, you might be wondering what to try first. Well, have no fear, here are 5 things you have to try in For Honor's open beta, or For Honor in general, for that matter. Number 1, taunting like there's no tomorrow. Taunts and emotes are pretty great no matter what the game, but let players pull them out in the middle of a medieval battleground and they suddenly become exquisite. Taunting other players has already become a cherished part of the For Honor experience, with this bizarre hip-thrusting move proving to be a definite favourite. Number 2, advanced practice. Now, you might think you intuitively know enough about medieval warfare to survive in For Honor without bothering to go through the tutorial first. I mean, how hard can swinging a sword at someone really be? Well, that, my friend, is exactly the kind of attitude that's going to get you killed. Achieving true mastery in For Honor is not easy, but there is an advanced practice mode in the tutorial that'll give you a big boost in terms of your survivability. So get in there, get to grips with the more nuanced elements of sword fighting, and you'll be back to triumphant crotch thrusting in no time. Number 3, dropping people off big tall things onto low firm things. Now, I've never killed anybody in single combat, but when it comes to sword fighting, I'm still fairly sure that picking where to stand is fairly important. This is especially true of For Honor, in which standing in the right place can set you up to throw your opponent into the void and to their inevitable death at the hands of gravity. And that is something well worth trying to master. It's effective, it's stylish, and most importantly, it's sure to infuriate your enemy. Number 4, picking your faction. Now, this next tip may sound obvious, as the only way to play For Honor is to pick a character, and, of course, every character belongs to a faction, but hear me out. For Honor actually has a metagame called Faction War. Basically, the game will go through cycles, with each cycle seeing the 3 different factions vie for control of the greatest number of territories. Players contribute to this effort by gathering war assets at the end of each multiplayer match and then giving them over to the faction. And at the end of each cycle, the most powerful faction gets rewards, like some fancy emblem frames, for example. There's a faction war going on in the beta right now, so you probably shouldn't spend loads of time umming and ahhing over what faction you want to side with. So to give you the best idea and allow you to choose quickly, let's have a quick run through the different classes you can take on the battlefield. The Knights are basically big chivalric brutes, and the Wardens are their easy-to-learn all-rounders, boasting a few defensive abilities to lend them decent survivability, but some good offensive capabilities as well. They have an unblockable shoulder barge, for instance, and some strong chances to interrupt enemy attacks and deal a lot of counter damage. The Conqueror, meanwhile, is a much more defensive character, relying on their heavy armour to absorb enemy attacks while their opponents tire themselves out. Once their stamina is depleted, it's time to put that big flail to work and batter the enemy to death while they're still vulnerable. The Conqueror is a bit harder to get to grips with than the more straightforward Warden, but master that tanking strategy and you'll be a force to be reckoned with. If standing there and absorbing blows like Homer Simpson in the boxing episode of The Simpsons isn't quite your style, however, you could always try the Peacekeeper. The Peacekeeper is a speedy class specialising in manoeuvrability and lightning-fast attacks. As the Peacekeeper, you can even apply a bleeding effect to your enemies, which, when you think about it, is kind of the point of fighting someone with a sword in the first place, but in terms of game mechanics, it's relatively special. All of this comes at a cost, however, as the Peacemaker only has a short engagement range and, as you might expect, is pretty light on armour. And rounding out the classes available for the Knights is the massive Lawbreaker. Armed with a poleaxe, they're capable of cutting, stabbing, and crushing attacks, so basically fail to block or dodge when a Lawbringer comes at you, and you're probably done for. That said, all that heft does leave the Lawbringer fairly open to counterattacks, making it one of the harder classes to wield effectively in the field of battle. Leaving the Knights for the Far East now, let's have a look at the Samurai. The Kensei are the samurai's answer to the Knight's Warden. They're decent all-rounders, although they differ in that they have an impressive melee range, and many of their moves can be used to initiate attack chains. They also have a level 1 feat that allows them to sprint when out of stamina, meaning they can get around the battlefield even when worn out from a fight, and keep the pressure up on the enemy team. The Shigoki, meanwhile, is all about brute force. With a massive swinging club and a large health pool, your goal is to get stuck into a crowd of enemies and break their defences. You'll be slow and cumbersome, granted, but time your attacks right and you should be able to smash through enemy lines and pave the way for your teammates to do the rest. The Orochi, meanwhile, is the closest thing the samurai have to the Peacekeeper. Similarly light armoured, the trick with these warriors is to pick at your enemies and force them out of position, leaving them open to deadly counterattacks. The Orochi only has the one weapon, a sturdy katana, where the Peacekeeper has two, but it does boast some decent deflection abilities as a trade-off, meaning you'll have a better chance of surviving a full frontal assault. And finally we come to the Nobushi. The Nobushi is a finicky class. With very light armour, they're super vulnerable to attack, but the Naginata is a long weapon designed to keep enemies at bay with a flurry of super quick strikes. The Nobushi is tricky to get to grips with, but the ability to harass your enemies from afar means you'll be able to control a zone with ease should you get good enough. And the third and final faction in For Honor is the Vikings, a beardy, tattooed bunch of warriors who look like they really enjoy smashing a few lovely beers in any chance they get. The Viking Raiders are basically walking, shouting battering rams made flesh. With two-handed axes and a bunch of feats geared towards moving faster and preserving stamina, you've got one job as a raider: start smashing your enemies, and then never stop. The Warlord, meanwhile, is more the thinking Vikings kind of warrior. With a shield and a short sword, they're all about counter-attacking. Deflect enough of your enemy's attacks, and an opportunity to poke a few holes in their torso will doubtless present itself. And oh yes, did I mention you'll have an unblockable headbutt? Because you'll have an unblockable headbutt. Now, you may have noticed there's an established pattern to these factions by now, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that this next class is lightly armoured. Unlike the Peacekeeper or the Orochi, however, the Berserker isn't as fussed with nimble dodges and pretty feints. Oh no. They're much more interested in infinite attack chains, stunning their opponents, and then, well, basically bathing in their blood, mostly. The Berserker is a hard class to master, but get it right and you'll basically be unstoppable. And the final class in For Honor is the Noble Valkyrie. While her combinations are a bit tricky to pick up, the Valkyrie is great for keeping enemies at bay before knocking them down for an easy kill. You'll only have light armour and a small shield to protect you when playing as a Valkyrie, but if it makes you feel any better, you can bash your enemies in the face with said shield, which is pretty handy. And number 5, hats. In For Honor, you'll be able to collect gear, either through looting, level progression, or by using in-game currency. Now, this gear does affect your stats, although these stats will be removed in certain game modes in order to prevent anyone gaining an unfair advantage. But sod the number crunching for a minute, because customizable gear means different hats. You can earn a bunch of hats, you can pick your favourite hat, and then you can wear that hat while killing people who are wearing their favourite hats. For Honor is basically one big lovely hat party, and that is quite alright with me. And with all that said and done, you should now be feeling pretty well informed about For Honor and eager to try out one or two things for yourself. But which class is your favourite? Which faction has the nicest hats? Let us know in the comments, and if you'd like to watch more video from Eurogamer, there are some on screen right now. Please do consider liking this video and subscribing if you enjoyed it, but really, there's no pressure. Either way, thanks for watching, and have a lovely day.